A secret that's been hidden for 60 years is finally coming to light. In the 1950s, Billie Holiday recorded 6 songs in a secret basement studio in the dark streets of Manhattan, one of music history's greatest mysteries. These recordings reveal a side of Lady Day that no one has ever heard: angry, vengeful, and brutally honest. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of these unreleased recordings and why they were hidden for 60 years. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, because in the coming weeks we'll be sharing other hidden recordings from Billie Holiday's life and shocking secrets from her FBI files. On a November night in 1953, in Manhattan's Lower East Side, in the basement of an old building on Delancey Street, a strange scene was unfolding. It was past midnight, and snow was falling outside. In that dark basement studio, Billie Holiday sat alone with a bottle of gin in her hand and an old microphone in front of her. But this wasn't an ordinary recording session. That night, Lady Day was about to record the most personal, most anger-filled songs of her life. The man organizing this secret recording session wasn't Sam Phillips, and it wasn't Sun Records. In fact, this man was a figure no one knew: Morris Weinstock, a mysterious character who ran a small music studio in Manhattan and had a deep admiration for Billie Holiday. Weinstock had been watching Lady Day being crushed under the censorship of record companies for years and wanted to give her the chance to let her real voice out. Morris Weinstock's story was quite interesting too. He was the child of a family that had immigrated from Russia in 1920, and his passion for music came from childhood. While his father ran a small radio repair shop on the Lower East Side, Morris had developed himself in electronics and sound technology. When he established his own studio in the 1940s, his goal wasn't just to make money, but to provide a free space for censored artists. Weinstock's studio was in the basement of building number 247 on Delancey Street. From the outside, there was an ordinary tailor shop, but when you went down through a secret door, a completely different world opened up. Morris had built this studio with his own hands. He had covered the walls with soundproof materials and installed professional recording equipment. Most importantly, only a few people he trusted knew about the studio's existence. The customers of this secret studio were very special: mostly blacklisted musicians, artists censored for political reasons, and experimental musicians that big companies didn't want came here. Weinstock didn't take money from them. He was just happy to contribute to art, living freely. This idealistic approach had made him a legendary figure in New York's underground music scene. His meeting with Billie Holiday wasn't accidental either. In the summer of 1952, Weinstock had gone to watch one of Lady Day's concerts. After the concert, he went backstage, introduced himself, and talked about his studio. At that time, Billie Holiday was being crushed under the pressures of the music industry, and Weinstock's offer seemed very appealing to her. Billie Holiday was going through the most difficult times of her career during that period. Her contract with Decca Records had been terminated. Columbia Records didn't want her. Even small jazz labels were hesitant to work with her because she was seen as very risky due to her drug use and the FBI's constant surveillance. But Morris Weinstock was different. He wanted to record not just Billie Holiday's voice, but her soul as well. Lady Day's situation at that time was truly heartbreaking. The FBI surveillance that had been going on since 1947 had turned her life into hell. Agents came wherever she went. There was surveillance at every concert. Even her home phone was tapped. This constant pressure had worn her down psychologically, increased her drug use, and endangered her music career. The music industry had also turned its back on her. The reactions from the southern states due to the Strange Fruit song had scared record companies. Moreover, Billie Holiday's increasing drug problem was making her unreliable. She was late to recording sessions, sometimes didn't come at all. This situation was damaging her professional relationships. The most painful part was that even her old friends were starting to distance themselves. Musicians, producers, and even close friends who had previously stood by her were starting to avoid Billie Holiday, because being in a relationship with Billie Holiday meant attracting the FBI's attention. No one wanted to take this risk. This isolation was driving Lady Day into even more despair. Music was no longer just a means of making money, but had become a struggle for survival. But big companies didn't want her, and small clubs paid very little. This vicious cycle was pushing her to seek alternatives. At this point, Morris Weinstock's offer provided a breathing opportunity, an environment where there was no money issue, no censorship, where only art mattered. For Lady Day, this was like paradise, because she now had so many things she wanted to say, but no platform would allow it. When Billie Holiday came to the basement studio that November night, she didn't bring any song lyrics with her, because what she was going to say was already prepared in her mind. The anger, resentment, and disappointment that had been accumulating inside her for years, all of it would come out that night. Weinstock didn't impose any restrictions on her. "Say whatever you want, lady," he said. "There are no limits tonight." The first song was called "You Took Everything," and told in striking language how the men in Billie Holiday's life had harmed her. This wasn't just a general complaint. There were very specific, very personal, very painful details. Even though Lady Day didn't name names in the song, listeners could understand who she was referring to. Starting with her manager John Levy, she was targeting every man who had abused her one by one. Some parts of the song's lyrics went like this: "You pretended to love me, but you just used me. You stole my money, you broke my soul, then you went and found someone else." These words were so direct and accusatory that even Weinstock was surprised. Billie Holiday was so angry that her voice was trembling, but at the same time it was very powerful. Musically, this song had a very minimalist arrangement. There was only piano accompaniment, and Billie Holiday's voice came completely to the fore. The tempo was slow but determined, as if every word had been carefully chosen and placed. The most impressive part was the bridge section. Here Lady Day's voice completely broke. She started crying, but then she strengthened again and moved on to the final verse. Weinstock would never forget the recording process of this song. Billie Holiday gave such a performance in front of the microphone that everyone in the studio started crying. This wasn't just music, it was a catharsis experience. Lady Day was letting out the pain she had been accumulating inside for years that night. The second song came out even harder. The piece titled "Blood on Your Hands" targeted the people who had driven Billie Holiday to drug addiction. Lady Day was openly naming names in this song and telling how these people sold her heroin and then reported her to the police. The line "You poisoned me, then you sold me out" was particularly striking. The most shocking part of this song was Billie Holiday's claim that some of the drug dealers were actually FBI informants. Musically, "Blood on Your Hands" was played in a more aggressive style. The third song was entirely about the FBI and police. This piece, called "Government Men," told how federal agents harassed her, how they raided her house, how they tapped her phones. The most surprising part was that Billie Holiday openly said the names of some FBI agents. This was a really dangerous move because artists who criticized the government in that period experienced serious problems. In the song "Government Men," Billie Holiday sang these lines: "They tap my phone, they search my home, they follow me wherever I roam. Agent Smith and Agent Jones, trying to break my spirit and bones." These lyrics were very specific for FBI agents, and there was a high possibility that real names were being used. The most striking part of the song was where Billie Holiday talked about the FBI's racist motivations. The lines, "They don't like my color, they don't like my song, they've been hunting me for way too long," exposed the racist factors behind federal surveillance. Musically, this song was the most experimental. It had completely moved away from traditional jazz structure and was constructed as a mix of spoken word and singing. In some parts, Billie Holiday was almost rapping, which was a very radical approach for the 1950s. In the fourth song, the focus was on the music industry. This piece, titled "Industry Vultures," told in detail how record companies, managers, and producers exploited her. In this song, Billie Holiday also criticized the racist structure of the music industry. The line, "White men got rich from my voice, but I'm still hungry," was particularly powerful. In this song, Billie Holiday was giving very specific financial details. She was explaining how much money she got from which company, how much commission managers took, even the royalty rates she got from some hit songs. This information was very exposing for that period's music industry. One of the most surprising claims was that some record companies deliberately fueled Billie Holiday's addiction problem. The line, "They keep me high so they keep me down, easier to control when I'm not around," openly expressed this conspiracy theory. "Industry Vultures" was the most complex song musically. It contained multiple tempo changes, key modulations, and dramatic pauses. Billie Holiday's vocal performance was also very varied. She used the entire dynamic range from whisper to shout. The fifth song was about personal relationships, but this time there was anger instead of sadness. This piece, called Broken Promises, told about the lovers who left her and how she regretted trusting them. The most dramatic part was what she said about her last lover, Louis Mackay. Lady Day openly described him as a parasite. In the song Broken Promises, Billie Holiday fully revealed her bitterness about love relationships. Every man I loved became my enemy. Using my heart like it was just a key were particularly painful lines. Among the men she named in this song were Jimmy Monroe, Joe Guy, and of course Louis Mackay. The most shocking revelation was Billie Holiday's claim that some of her lovers had reported her to the FBI. In the lines, "You whispered sweet lies while you sold my secrets, broke my heart and my spirit," this betrayal was clearly expressed. The sixth and final song was the most surprising one. This piece, titled My Real Story, revealed completely unknown events in Billie Holiday's life. In this song, Lady Day talked about the sexual abuse done to her, being forced to use drugs, and even witnessing a murder. This last detail was particularly striking because Billie Holiday had never talked about murder before. My Real Story was perhaps the most disturbing of the six songs. Billie Holiday was talking about her childhood traumas here, but giving very graphic details. "I was just a child when they stole my innocence, used my body like it was just an expense," were very difficult lines to listen to. The most shocking part was her telling about a murder incident she witnessed in the 1940s. In the lines, "I saw them kill that man in cold blood, buried him where nobody understood," she was clearly describing this event. If this was true, Billie Holiday had been living among very dangerous people. This last song's musical arrangement was the most minimal, only Billie Holiday's voice and very simple piano accompaniment. The tempo was extremely slow, almost dirge-like. Lady Day's vocal delivery was also very intimate, as if she was reading a secret diary. Morris Weinstock would later describe what happened that night like this: "Billie Holiday wasn't just singing that night. She was cleansing her soul. Every word came from the fire inside her. Listening to these recordings was disturbing, but at the same time mesmerizing. I had never heard anything like this." But when the recordings were finished, Weinstock was in a big dilemma. The materials he had were incredibly powerful musically, but at the same time very dangerous. If he published these recordings, both Billie Holiday's and his own life could be in danger. Lady Day's openly naming names, criticizing the FBI, and even talking about murder didn't make these recordings suitable for publication. The night immediately after, Weinstock started developing paranoia. He felt his studio was being watched. This situation affected him so much that he closed the studio for a week and didn't leave his house. His first thought was to give the recordings to Billie Holiday, but Lady Day refused this. "You need to keep these, Morris," she said. "Maybe one day the world will be ready to hear these truths." These words deeply affected Weinstock because they showed that even Billie Holiday was aware of how explosive these recordings were. Weinstock put the recordings in his special safe and didn't tell anyone, but these recordings had also changed his life. Billie Holiday's performance that night was so powerful that Weinstock's perspective on music had completely changed. Music was no longer just entertainment, but also a therapeutic power. In 1954, Billie Holiday called Weinstock, asking him to destroy the recordings, because she sensed the FBI was closing in, and if these recordings were found, both she and Weinstock could have big problems. But Weinstock didn't agree to this. These recordings were too valuable, and future generations needed to know these truths. Whether this decision was right or wrong could be debated, but thanks to Weinstock's stubbornness, these recordings were able to reach our day. Of course, this wasn't easy during 60 years. Weinstock planned to take this secret to his grave, but toward the end of his life, his conscience started bothering him. In the 1970s, even after Billie Holiday's death, Weinstock, who still didn't dare to publish these recordings, left them to his most trusted student, David Sterling. Sterling had received clear instructions from Weinstock about what to do with these recordings. "Publish them when the world is ready." David Sterling listened to and researched these recordings for years. He checked how much of what Billie Holiday said was true. The result was surprising. Everything Lady Day said was true. The people she named had really abused her. The FBI had really harassed her. The music industry had really exploited her. Sterling's research process was real detective work. First, he had to determine who the people Billie Holiday mentioned in the recordings were. Lady Day had mostly just given names, not given details, but Sterling patiently did cross-references and identified these people one by one. The abuse behaviors of manager John Levy described in the recordings matched exactly with court documents Sterling found. There was a case filed against Levy in 1949 but later withdrawn. The details in the case confirmed what Billie Holiday told in the songs. The most difficult part was identifying the FBI agents. It wasn't clear whether the names Billie Holiday gave in the recordings were codes or real names. Sterling used the Freedom of Information Act to apply to FBI archives to solve this problem. After years of legal battle, he managed to access some documents. In the FBI files, there really were the agent names that Billie Holiday mentioned. Agent Smith and Agent Jones were real people, and they were responsible for Lady Day's surveillance in the 1950s. This discovery surprised Sterling because it showed how accurate Billie Holiday's memory was. The most complex investigation was about the murder. Sterling did research in police archives and discovered that a mysterious murder incident had really happened in Harlem during those dates. According to police files, the victim was a small-time criminal named Tommy "the Fish" Martinelli. The perpetrator was never found, but the case file mentioned prominent jazz singer as a witness. This witness's name remained classified. Sterling's biggest breakthrough happened in 2015. He contacted Robert Morrison, a retired FBI agent. Morrison had been working on the Billie Holiday case in the 1950s and now in his old age wanted to reveal some truths. What Morrison told was shocking. The FBI really was using people around Billie Holiday as informants. This was exactly the entrapment scenario that Billie Holiday claimed in the recordings. In the 2010s, Sterling converted these recordings to digital format and started storing them safely, but he was still waiting for the right time to publish them. Billie Holiday's life story was starting to become popular again during that period, and maybe the world was finally ready to hear these truths. In 2018, the project to remake The Lady Sings the Blues film influenced Sterling's decision. Billie Holiday's story was being told once again, but the truth was still missing. Sterling now thought it was wrong for these recordings to remain secret. In 2020, during the pandemic period, Sterling finally took action. He first shared these recordings with a small group of music historians. The experts' reaction was very clear. These recordings would rewrite music history. Billie Holiday's known image would completely change. The first expert group consisted of only 5 people, and each analyzed the recordings according to their own expertise. Dr. Angela Davis's initial reaction was very emotional. "This changes everything about how we see Billie Holiday," she said. "She wasn't just a victim, she was fighting back." Robert Christgau described the recordings as revolutionary from a music criticism perspective. "These recordings completely redefine Billie Holiday's artistic range," he said. When Farah Jasmine Griffin did literary analysis, she saw these lyrics as autobiography's most raw form. Dr. Ingrid Monson from Harvard's assessment was, "These recordings are musical documentation of the civil rights era. Billie Holiday transforms personal experience into political statement." Industry reaction was mixed. While major labels expressed legal concerns, independent companies were very interested. The most striking reaction came from Columbia University music professor Dr. Angela Davis. "These recordings show that Billie Holiday wasn't just a victim, but also a warrior. She was a strong woman and knew how to make her voice heard." In 2021, the existence of the recordings was first announced in the New York Times. The article created a big shock effect. The music world was impatient to hear these recordings, but Sterling was still cautious, because some of the people mentioned in these recordings were still alive and needed to be protected. The biggest problem Sterling had to solve was the legal situation. Billie Holiday's estate owners, the FBI, and even some former music industry figures could oppose the publication of these recordings. Therefore, he needed to act very carefully. In 2022, Sterling started working with Sarah Goldman, an experienced music lawyer. Goldman specialized in such sensitive situations and could show Sterling the right way. Initial analysis showed that publishing the recordings was legally possible, but the real problem was the ethical situation. Publishing these recordings meant exposing Billie Holiday's private moments. Lady Day had recorded these not for public consumption, but for therapeutic purposes. Sterling gathered a panel of Billie Holiday experts to overcome this dilemma. The decision from the panel was clear. These recordings had historical value, and future generations needed to know about them, but the publication method needed to be very carefully planned. These recordings should be used not to create sensation, but to tell Billie Holiday's real story. In 2023, Sterling finally made his decision. These recordings would be published in documentary format. Not just music, but context would also be given. Billie Holiday's mental state at that time, the problems she experienced, and the reasons for making these recordings would be explained in detail. The documentary's production started in 2024. Billie Holiday experts, music historians, and even researchers working in FBI archives joined the project. The goal was to present these recordings in the right context. As of today, these 6 songs still haven't been fully published, but excerpts of the recordings have met with audiences in documentary format. Initial reactions were very strong. Billie Holiday fans were shocked because they saw a side of their beloved artist they had never known. The documentary's production process was extremely careful. Sterling and his team meticulously planned every detail. In the soundtrack, the original voice was preserved but sensitive names were bleeped out. Netflix had shown initial interest but withdrew due to legal complications. Finally, independent production company Magnolia Pictures picked up the project. The documentary's premiere was made at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival, and audience reaction was overwhelming. New York Times cultural critic Wesley Morris wrote a comprehensive review. This documentary liberates Billie Holiday from the victim narrative. She was fierce, she was angry, she fought back. Public reaction was also intense. The hashtag Billie Holiday Truth was trending on social media. The African American community's reaction was particularly powerful. This was proof that Billie Holiday was a social justice warrior. A research boom started in the academic world. Graduate students chose these recordings as dissertation topics. International reaction was also significant. European jazz critics saw this discovery as a major breakthrough. Future plans are ambitious. Sterling is planning a complete box set release. Educational initiatives are being developed. Broadway production is also under consideration. Preservation efforts are maximum priority and original tapes are stored in climate-controlled facilities. This story shows us that artists' real stories can sometimes be very different from their public image. Billie Holiday wasn't just a beautiful voice, but also a strong woman who knew how to fight for her rights. If you enjoyed this video and are curious about other hidden stories in Billie Holiday's life, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Next week we'll make a video about even more surprising documents found in Lady Day's FBI files. Tell me in the comments, do you think publishing these recordings is the right thing to do, or is Billie Holiday's privacy more important?